Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Dru, and welcome to the Kodeco Podcast. In this podcast, we'll keep you up to date with the latest app development tech talk. Now, here's the show. This is the Kodeco Podcast. Now, this episode was recorded on Tuesday, the 5th of March, 2024, and I am your host, Dru Freeman. And this show, I am with both my amazing co-hosts, Jennifer Bailey and Suzanna Skyer-Gupta.
Thanks, Dru. Today on the show, we're joined by experienced Kodeco contributors and all-around cool guys, Fuad, Kamal, and Franklin Byaruhanga. Fuad specializes in mobile strategy and development for the health and fitness industries. He's also a mentor, professor, and author.
And Franklin is a native mobile app developer with a telecommunications background. He actively participates in open source projects and takes pleasure in imparting knowledge as a mentor for our Kodeco boot camps.
Franklin, Fuad, welcome to the show. It's great to have you both here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Drew.
Yay.
It's great to be here.
Now, Fuad, you've been on the show. It's been a few seasons, but you have been on our show before, and it's good to have you back. Franklin, always appreciate having new people on the show. So thank you for making time. What time is it locally for you?
For me, it's 6:21 p.m. Eastern.
And Franklin?
For me, it's 2:21 a.m. in the morning.
Franklin,
Oh my
I
gosh.
really
Thank
salute
you,
you
Franklin.
I really thank you for taking the arrow on this one.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So we're going to sort of make this one a little more roundtable-ish discussion, unlike, well, all of our podcasts are somewhat discussion-like, but this one is going to be just sort of shooting around, trying to find out a list of favorites. As developers, we sort of fall into those blocks of what sits in my taskbar, in my dock, the things that I rely on, the things that I could not operate without, the things that when a colleague says, why don't you try this one, you're lost. We're going to be talking to two very good and experienced engineers about what is their popular tools of the day. Fuad, I'm going to start with you. Before we get into it, Fuad, give me a little bit of background into you, your platforms, and what you work on.
Sure. So currently, I'm pretty much focused on Android. Before that, I was doing iOS, and sometimes I have to go back and forth between both platforms. So I'm doing Android, but I'm on a team that's developing an app for both platforms. So we have to test, like, for example, a chat app. So we have to test both platforms at the same time, regardless of what code base you're using.
And Franklin, how about you?
Well, I originally started with iOS, and then I started learning Android last year when I did the Android bootcamp. So now I'm going to be like a mix and match, like Fuad, kind of.
Wonderful. And then I have Jen and Suze on my sides here, at least from my point of view with the five rectangles that I have, that I have a good balance of Android and iOS. I come from the world entirely of iOS, so we should have a good mix all around. So let's start, obviously, as we've talked about platforms, let's talk about the IDEs. Now, in iOS and in general, you don't get a whole lot of wiggle room. Now, I do know that people do tend to mess around with some of the other IDEs. I'm an Xcode person. I don't really use anything besides Xcode for my development environment. Suze, or any of your iOS experience for the rest of you folks, have you used anything else to basically do your work until you need to actually build?
For coding, basically it's Xcode. Yeah, pretty much. And even within Xcode, like playgrounds and stuff, like it's within the IDE usually.
I very rarely use BB Edit, but it's more, I use it more as like a clipboard to bring stuff back and forth from Xcode, which probably there are better ways to do that. I'm a little bit curious. I haven't done this, but multiple people have said to me that they use Visual Studio Code alongside Xcode often in order to, like, people are, these days people are saying so they can run Visual Studio Code with like Copilot in it, with an AI tool in it. And then, obviously we need Xcode for the to build. So
Right. But I do know that there are people who have actually bundled it down to just using the Xcode build command line interface and will use Studio or Visual or BB Edit. I do use BB Edit for certain tool functions, but I think of it more as an editor than an integrated development environment. So let's flip over to the Android side. Is it just Android Studio and that's it? Or is there other things that make it work for you? Jen, let's start with you.
All right. Generally, I like to use Android Studio. I believe people can use IntelliJ. I've had good luck putting Copilot on all my editors, including Xcode. There was a way to do that. So I've got AI in all of my editors. And one cool product, I don't know if it's still kept up, but years ago when Android was new, they had MIT App Inventor. And that was a fun way to build an app online for people who had no programming experience, and it had more of a Scratch-like interface. So
how
sometimes
fun.
there's tools like that. So sometimes I look for third-party tools. They're usually not apps themselves. There are academic tools for learning Kotlin and for trying to learn about Android, but I mostly just use Android Studio if I'm actually building an app.
Franklin?
Well, same. I also use Android Studio, but Jennifer said something about scratchpads. So in the terms of scratchpads, well, they're not really considered IDEs, but more like things that you run to just write small scripts, something like playgrounds or Kotlin playgrounds. They're called playgrounds in both Xcode and in both iOS and Android. But like Kotlin playgrounds or Swift playgrounds, where you're just writing just code, but without any purpose of building the app, but just writing small snippets to like test different functions.
Fuad, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much the same. Bulk of my work is in Android Studio. I do use IntelliJ, but not for Android work. Like sometimes I also teach like Android and Kotlin. So for just learning, like isolating Kotlin by itself, IntelliJ is great. Pretty much like JetBrains is the ultimate developer of IDEs, no matter what the platform is, even back in Flash platform days. So, but it's just first party is usually what you have to stick with because of, to be in the cutting edge. But luckily for us in Android world, JetBrains is the one who makes the IDE. So that's great. The playgrounds for Android also or for Kotlin, there's a web version. Like it's just you type it into a web browser and on the Kotlin lang. And that's like really fast. You don't have to fire up an ID and all that. So that's really useful. But yeah, pretty much Android Studio for actual Android work. And then playgrounds I use a lot for just testing out small pieces of code.
Now, we've spoken on a previous episode about moving from XML to Compose. And we're going to be talking about the same thing on UIKit, moving off to Swift UI. Let's talk about laying out your interfaces. I mean, there's so much out there, from just doing it straight in the IDE itself to things like Figma. What are some of the things that you've come in contact with? And Fuad, I already see you nodding, so I'm gonna turn it over to you.
I mean, you mentioned Figma, so I mean, I've been getting into that a lot more, but like with big dev teams especially, you always the UX people are using Figma and they're handing over Figma designs. But even just for prototyping, wireframing, like Figma is really cool. It's getting better and better. Like they have this new, what's it called? There's like a lightweight thing that's within Figma.
It's not the sharing thing, right? Not the Fig
No,
Jam
no,
thing.
it's Fig Jam. Fig Jams are really
Okay.
cool. And it's like, and you can do like a live, like you can do a Zoom session and just open up a Fig Jam and like just whiteboard and sketch stuff out. So we use it a lot at the last startup I was at. So it's just really useful for wireframing stuff out and designing stuff. But now like I'm using for my students now. So like we used to use Adobe XD, but like Adobe tried to buy Figma and I guess that just fell through recently. Which I think is actually a good thing. But anyway, that aside, yeah, so we used to use XD for the students, and now I just switched to Figma because basically Adobe stopped supporting XD, even though the sale wasn't complete. So I don't know if they're going to change that. But anyway, Figma now has all these templates that you can just jump into Figma and create like a mobile app, like right away. Like just use a template or a website template, and you have like all the little pieces there the start point, you can just rearrange them, copy paste. It's really easy to use. So I really like that.
Isn't there
Right.
also some back end part where you can then export that as like Swift UI? I think there is.
So I know one of the companies I worked at, there was like basically we didn't really use it because like the code you actually get is always questionable. Like, and that may
Right,
change and
right.
make it better, but like for developers, usually like it's just the main benefit of having the Figma there is like you can like mouse over stuff and see right away like, oh, what's the color, what's the pixels, or what's the density. Like there's like UI clues that you can
The
get that
specs are
really
right there.
quickly. Exactly. So Figma is really easy to work with in that respect, but we don't really use the code generation. I don't know if anyone else has a different experience with that.
Franklin, how about you? What are you using for layout and design?
Well, for the layout inspection, I was actually talking about the internal tools. So like both Android Studio and Xcode have a way to inspect the layout inside internally when the app is running. And for the iOS side, we also have another tool called Reveal. Reveal can also do an introspection of the app, and you can see down to the windows, down to the layering, and rotate it around 3D and all that. That's using the Reveal app. So although like Xcode has its own internal tool, still Reveal is a better choice for me when I'm doing an inspection of a live running app.
I've actually been really taken with Swift UI, and I get the same impression from Jetpack Compose in that it's very easy to assemble the base UI directly as you're doing the coding. And as a result, it's easy to think in that sense of design without thinking about all of the what the state will be and how the interactions will work. Suzanne, what do you use for design?
I was curious how Figma compares to Canva, and I'll be honest, I usually use Google Drawings because it's very handy, and but I don't have to do super professional looking wireframes. But I find Google Drawings is a great quick go-to to make a quick drawing.
I mean, I'll say, okay, for work, so I work in a tiny team, one of whom, there are four of us, but one of the four is a graphic designer. So what do I use for design? Well, usually I use Braden, our designer. But when I'm trying to communicate something like, oh, what if we do this? I draw, and I draw on my iPad. So I use like, the Apple Pencil on the iPad. But I'm aware, like, Figma's ubiquitous. We started, when we started working together several years ago, using Sketch, but I think that went away. And, I don't know if it's actually gone, but we're not using it anymore. We're using Figma. So I should learn that one of these days.
Fuad, you?
Yeah, I also wanted to mention like Photoshop. Like I've used that forever, like since the 90s, and I still use it even today. Like especially if I want an app icon, like or like now recently, like Android just switched to like making it much easier to use vectors for all the assets, but I still use Photoshop sometimes in conjunction with some other tools to create vectors. But like there's like some pretty cool plugins that you can use with Photoshop to just like spit out all the different icons. And I used to use that for iOS too. Like you need all the different assets for different sizes for a given icon asset. So you just use a plugin and you just put in your source, and it's like it creates everything for you. There's like a really good website I used to use. I still use it.
Oh, I know what you're
We'll
talking about.
include
I've
the-
used this too.
We'll
Yeah.
include the website in the show notes. I also use Photoshop for, especially for icon design, sometimes for touching up graphic elements for the app. And then I just remembered one other that I use for a lot of layout, and that's OmniGraffle. And Omni is a company that's been around. It predates OS 10 because Omni used to develop for Next Step. And OmniGraffle is this wonderful, it can be used for thought process. It can be used for organizational charts. It can be used for rudimentary graphics. But at the same time, it can also use stencils, which are elements from something else. And I will use iOS wireframe elements and just move them around. So OmniGraffle is one that I've really enjoyed to use.
I wanted to say a couple things about icons. One is, thank goodness, it's easier now because now we can just put our 1024 by 1024 image and App Store Connect does
Yes.
behind the scenes, we're getting all of our sizes. And the other thing I was going to say, so Jen brought up Canva, and I use Canva as well. Canva, it just stuns me every time I try it. Like it's, whoa, there's so much in there. I have used Canva for icon design for stuff I'm playing with, not stuff I've released to the App Store. And I sit with the same question. Is that okay? Like, what's the legality of using Canva assets in apps that we release and hope to profit from? And I don't know the answer to that. And it's not clear in Canva's terms and conditions. It's clear if you are making digital products and you're starting with Canva designs and modifying them, that's okay. But if you're using their assets in an app you sell, it's a gray area. So I don't know if we have any other Canva users on here who've used it as a, as an indie dev.
And I suppose I should announce at this point that
To be
this is
honest,
just
I have used Canva, but I never thought.
Okay, Franklin's got a time delay there. I suppose I should announce at this point that this is just our general popular list. We are not getting endorsed for any of these products that we're mentioning. There are no kickbacks on this one. This is just developers to developers. What do you think will help you out? Go ahead, Franklin.
Now, I was going to answer the Suzanna's question. I've used it, but I never thought about the legality until this moment. So I was also wondering the same thing in my head now. Did what I do was it legal or not? So I just thought about it right now, and I was like, okay. But it was just a question that went through my head, but I never actually thought about it myself.
Yeah, I do wonder because like Canva has icon sets built in. So let's say you're making your own, cute little camera app, as I was doing to play around the other day. And, you can find an adorable like camera icon and then drop a pretty gradient behind it. And then if you put that in the right size square and export it, boom, there's your icon. So can I sell that now? I mean, I couldn't sell it because if I were to put that into app review, Apple would be like, there's a camera right in your phone, rejected. But I do wonder about that.
Yeah.
But maybe it gets you part of the way there and then you do more with it in another program,
So on a similar note, I mean, it's not Canva. I don't know about the answer to the Canva question, like legality wise, but like if you have a paid subscription to Midjourney, you can generate assets and you own all the rights for that. So you can sell those, you can do whatever you want with that. So I have used Midjourney to like get ideas or like modify or have a starting point for an app icon. And it does it if you use the right prompts, like you can get pretty decent results a lot of times. And with each iteration, they're getting better at it. So and again, you can use it totally legally.
I've used Dolly for similar, although I don't think I'm using the right prompts because I've used it and then thought, oh, not that. But
okay, I'm going to change speeds on us because any one of these topics that we're looking at today, we could spend the entire show just going around, and I want to get through as much as I can. So I'm going for quantity with quality. I want to talk networking, and not the way that you might be expecting. One of the things that a developer will deal with a lot in networking is either designing or dealing with endpoints at a server. And this requires testing. And we don't necessarily want to do our initial testing by writing up a quick software program. So what kind of software have you been using to test endpoints and do that kind of client to server communication testing with? I will start that ball rolling by saying that there's two that I fall down on a lot, not fall down, but use a lot. And that is Postman. And the other one is called Rapid API. Now, again, I'm coming from the Apple OS world. So your mileage will probably vary if you're a Windows developer, but Fuad, let's start with you on this one.
Sure. I mean, there was a tool, I even forget the name of it now because I stopped using it because they got bought out, but it was a really good like iOS, not iOS, but like Mac only tool. But then I started using Postman on top of that, and then because the other tool went away, so I was like, okay, Postman is the way to go. And then there's Swagger, which is nice because
Mhm.
it will tell you like when your backend people change the API on you, it will automatically update. And it's pretty useful for testing as well. But I mean, I think Postman is what I use the most on the desktop.
Yeah, Swagger is definitely helpful for knowing what your API menu looks like. Franklin, have you done any of this work?
Yes, I've done a little bit of it. I was also using Postman, but originally Postman couldn't generate some of the networking code because sometimes you just want to copy and paste and test it out. But the first app I was using, you call it Rapid API. I think I know it as Pause. Pause was bought by Rapid API. I still know it as Pause. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then as time has evolved, the app has not been updated. So it still generates code, but it generates the old style of URL session and the old style of coding. So I just moved over to Postman. That's what I use now.
Yeah, that's what I was using too. I was using Pause, and then they got bought out and everything changed. So I was like, this is not working.
Jen, do you want to add anything?
I'm with the majority. I tend to use Postman the most, and I haven't explored a lot of others.
Okay.
Maybe one thing I can add is that beyond monitoring, sometimes you want to do inspection. Like you want to see the actual packet going and coming back with data, and you want to do it from the simulator on app. And for that one, there are like two choices, either Proxyman or Charles. And those are like, they also involve the networking. Charles is, I think, the more old school one. It's as old school as I know anyway. And then Proxyman is the more new, more modern markup. I don't know if there's a Windows equivalent of Proxyman though.
Yeah, I every company I go to says just set up a Charles, just set Charles up on your end. And I inevitably, at every company I'm with, Charles has some little finicky, doesn't work this way, doesn't work that way. And I wind up going to Proxyman, and Proxyman is just wonderful, except again, both of them little pricey.
Oh, interesting. So I worked on tutorials here at Kodeco for both of those, and I was wondering where Charles fit into this. So
can I ask you guys, does Proxyman work on the like mobile client too? Because that's one benefit of Charles. You can run it on your desktop, but you can also run it on the mobile device.
Yeah.
Yes, Proxyman can run on your, okay, I know it can run on your iOS device. I'm not sure about Android device, but iOS device, it has a companion app. Like when you subscribe for 1 year, you get a companion app on the iOS side, and that also can do recordings and send files. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure Proxyman does have an Android equivalent. I will have to check. If it does, we'll have it in the show notes. We've talked about getting the data from client to server, server to client. We've talked about listening to the data travel. Network monitoring kind of goes more along the lines of IT than software development. Do you find yourself doing any kind of netmod?
In my case, it's mostly a troubleshooting method, less a development method. Like when things don't work as you expect, that's when you go to those tools. But you don't start. Maybe you can start out with Proxyman, but like I mean with Postman, you can start out with Postman to see the data. But Proxyman is only used when something has gone wrong. At least that's my experience.
And then there's tools built into the IDEs on both sides, like in Android Studio and Xcode. So like a lot of times, like we had an app that we were troubleshooting, like we came into a legacy project and like it was making 1 million API calls or should be making 1. But you can see those spikes pretty clearly when you're looking at, those network tools that are built into the IDE.
The instrumentation tools for Xcode are outstanding. And again, I wish I could comment more about the Android side. Jennifer, are there instrumentation style tools for Android?
Yes, there are. So there's quite a few. And I think you could rely on them quite a bit to troubleshoot for something like that.
And that's all part of Android Studio?
Yes. Yes, and there's a lot built into the device itself under the developer menu. So there's quite a few profiling tools and things in there too that you can work with.
And actually, I can't think of, like, is there any profiling tool that's in Xcode that we don't have in Android? Franklin, maybe it's like you might be more familiar with that.
The one I can say is that network monitoring tool that we have in Android Studio. We have something similar in instruments, but the weird thing, it only works with real devices. It doesn't work with simulators. I do not know why they did it like that. It's a weird design choice. But the one in Android Studio can work with the emulator. So not sure about why that is. Yeah.
Thank you for
It's
that.
in instruments. It was introduced like 2 years back, but the lack of simulator support is what turned me off it.
That's interesting. Also, like, I don't know, does this work on Xcode? But like, we can debug Bluetooth connections even using the emulator on Android. Can you do that on iOS?
I don't know.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think that's
Oh,
also a real
Bluetooth.
device.
Bluetooth development-wise has two worlds. It has old Bluetooth development, which is a nightmare, and new Bluetooth world, which is the BTLE. And the BTLE is much easier to debug. The old Bluetooth, that's taking me back to decades and many NDAs. Let's talk about something that every developer has to work with, and that is documentation. And I know that you have a choice in the Apple world of either going through the documentation that lives with Xcode, going to the website, but going beyond that, going beyond just the simple documentation. How do you obtain things? Do you tend to prefer hard-written book? Do you tend to prefer ebooks? What works best for your documentation needs, and not just documentation, but learning in general? Franklin?
I would say for documentation, there are like two tools I rely on. One is called Dash. I don't know. It has a collection of documents for almost everything, and you can hook it up with shortcuts like from Alfred or from whatever. So you can just highlight a word and it will find it for you. And can even, like, let's say you're on Xcode, it can only search the Apple docs specifically for that. So for documentation, I think there is no better than Dash, but like Dash is purely based on whatever the company is giving you. There is another tool called a companion app for SwiftUI. It's sold on the App Store, but it's really detailed SwiftUI. It doesn't do all of Apple's frameworks. It specializes in just the SwiftUI framework. So I'd say those are the two most used tools, Dash and the companion app for SwiftUI. It has a really long name.
SwiftUI Companion.
It like yeah,
SwiftUI Companion,
for SwiftUI.
the one that sits in the menu bar and just
and yeah, you can search for things and do all sorts of things.
Yeah, I love SwiftUI Companion. I try to like farm it out on every developer I ever meet who's doing SwiftUI work, because it not only gives you quick lookup, but it'll give you sample code that is actually playable in the documentation. So you can move arguments for calls around and see how that affects things.
Oh, that's really good. Yeah, I looked at that and then I thought it's not inexpensive. And I thought that is not inexpensive. But something I love that is in some ways similar, but Mark Moykins, his company is Big Mountain Studio, his whole shtick is visual books. And so he goes through with like SwiftUI mastery and has like picture after picture after picture. And then how did I get this effect? Here's the code. Let me walk you through exactly what I did. And then he also has videos and like sample projects. And, you know, it's not quite as seamlessly integrated as you're describing with the SwiftUI companion, but it's good stuff. If you like to just like flip through and be like, I want to do that. How did you do that? It's great for that.
I've seen a series of books like that for things like shaders, so that you can get
Mhm.
really down to the deep metal layer and how those effects are actually created, talking about the mathematics, taking you through the steps.
Oh,
And
that'd be so useful for
I
that.
really enjoy those kind of things.
Yeah.
Now, source
Mm.
code control has gone through so many changes over so many years. And if you're really, really old school Apple, you remember Projector, which was part of the Macintosh Programmers Workshop IDE. But we have gone through this and that and the other. And the word now is, for the most part, Git. We have Git websites, we have GitHub, we have GitLab, we have many Gits. Matter of fact, Atlassian has its own, and theirs is Bitbucket. But what is your client tool for Git? Do you prefer the command line approach, or do you prefer the GUI approach? Fuad, why don't we start with you on this one?
So I have a hard and fast fit for Git client. I'm a very visual person. I don't like the command line, and I never remember any of the commands because I don't use it as much. But I love Tower. Git Tower is amazing. It's awesome.
Oh, okay.
If I ever go to a company and they don't like provide license, I'll just pay for it myself. So it's that to me, that's a really nice tool. There's another one that's really visual and looks really cool called Git Kraken, but I could just never quite like grok that as much. It just I don't know what it was, but it looks really cool. But Tower, I mean, anything that you can do in command line, the biggest holdup with IDEs for Tower, I mean for Git, is like usually, well, there's some subset of things you have to use command line for. But Tower, I have not found anything you can't do with their IDE that you can do on the command line. So it's pretty much feature for feature. It's pretty awesome. And then for like you mentioned in the notes, for conflicts, I love Kaleidoscope. I mean, I've been using it forever, and maybe it's a little bit old school, but like it works really well, and they just keep making it better. And it integrates with Tower, so like case closed.
I haven't used Kaleidoscope in years. I've actually switched to BB Edit for my comparisons, for my searches, for my side by sides. But God, I used to use Kaleidoscope all the time. Franklin, how about you on clients?
My client of choice is Fork. It's called Fork. I used to be a Git Tower guy. Then they changed subscriptions, and then I was like, it's for Git. So I simply switched to Fork, but I still pay for Kaleidoscope for comparisons, because match conflicts, they don't look as good in Fork, and Kaleidoscope is like, it can do like a 3-way match and everything. So I think Kaleidoscope for comparisons, and then for the client itself, it's Fork.
And Kaleidoscope even supports image comparisons. It's pretty amazing.
Yes.
I love Atlassian's tools, and I know Jira is becoming last decade's news and all of that, but I like the Bitbucket client. It's called SourceTree. It does work with any Git, whether it's self-hosted, corporate hosted, cloud hosted, it doesn't matter. And I've always liked it. I agree with you that I love the look of Git Kraken, but again, it's just one of those things that my brain just hasn't wrapped around it yet.
I think we do have to just appreciate that they called it Git Kraken and that their app icon features a Kraken monster. So, they should get points for that, even if people ultimately realize our recommendation is Tower.
I think whoever designed it is a really good designer. It looks really pretty, and it looks like some of the features they show, like on their website, it looks like, wow, this looks really neat for comparisons, but just not as easy to use, I think, as Tower.
I know. So I strongly suspect I'm the person with the most junior dev skills on this discussion, and I'm working with a couple other people, one of whom's more experienced, to make an app we're hoping for an upcoming conference. And we're confusing ourselves, the two of us who are less experienced, in working with Git. And the more experienced guy said, okay, right away at the end of this call, I want you both to download GitHub Desktop and just please stop using the command line and try and, like improve your understanding by using GitHub Desktop. And so that is, for somebody who's new, that is a starting place. But as somebody who's used like command line for many years, just because I used to work for a Unix company. There's stuff you can't do with GitHub Desktop, but it is free and it's graphical. So that's there for people who are new and looking for that, the easiest price point.
So Drew was talking about the Bitbucket client. That's, I think, also free.
I think SourceTree is free too. I think you're right.
Yeah. And also, if you're trying to like grok Git for the first time, I really recommend, like, if you Google like Git tutorial, you'll see a bunch from Atlassian. They have some amazing tutorials. I think that they're really good, and they walk you through even the different types of like Git flow and the different types of methodologies you can use in Git.
Yeah, I think that's a trick of it is so powerful, and there are so many different workflows that are supported that it's a lot.
Oh, I enjoy using GitHub Desktop. That's usually adequate. I was a big command line user years ago, but I like to use GitHub Desktop or VS Code, or what's built into the editor usually is adequate for me. And I'm with you, Drew. I really liked the Atlassian tools as well. So I used Bitbucket before GitHub was free, and I really like that tool.
Let's have a very quick let's knock them down, throw down war here. I'm just going to go down the line. I'm going to ask you your name. I'm going to say your name, and you tell me your browser of choice. Fuad?
Safari.
Suze?
Chrome.
Franklin?
Safari.
Jen?
Chrome.
And I'm Safari, so it's 3-2. Now, obviously, we're gonna have to get more people on the show. It's interesting.
Why didn't anyone say Bing?
Not Bing. What's the new one from Microsoft?
Edge.
Edge.
Yeah.
I just recently got a Happy Halloween card from Outlook. It's interesting how things are moved into the cloud, but the cloud belongs to Google. And then there's the standard Microsoft set of productivity tools. And then there's your individual platform of tools. Like Apple has its own answers to Microsoft's Office. So, Jen, let's start with you. What is your productivity tools of choice?
As far as documents, I use Google Docs as much as possible because it's all cloud and it's simple and free, and I don't always have my Office installed. So other than that, I would use Microsoft Office. But I use Google Docs, and they're adequate for probably the vast majority of what I do.
Suze?
It depends on what I'm doing. I use a whole bunch of different things. I do use Google Docs. I use text edit a weird amount of time, but I like it. And I have it set to show Comic Sans in a huge font, so you guys can all just cringe as you listen. I use Apple Notes a lot. I use BB Edit sometimes. I write on my iPad in Noteful, and sometimes I just write on paper, which is made from trees that are flattened.
Paper OS shall always be there for you. It doesn't run out of battery. Fuad, how about you?
Exactly.
So if today you told me that all the apps are gonna like disintegrate, like the world's coming to an end, and you can save one app, it would be Bare Notes for me. I rely on that for everything.
Oh.
Like my life depends on Bare Notes. It supports like so many things, Markdown. I just love it. I journal all the time. I use Bare Notes. But I have to say, like Susan was saying, like there's actually when you write with a pen, it activates a different part of your brain. So I have a favorite fountain pen I've had since I was really young, that my uncle gave me, and like that's like writing with a fountain pen on a notepad is really key for me too.
I took calligraphy in college. I love writing with a fountain pen.
Franklin, what are your choices?
For note taking, there's the app I use is Quiver, mostly because all the others I tried, formatting code was so hard. So Quiver is my choice because formatting code is very easy. I just write the statement that I want, and then I just say format this to Swift, and it just does that. It builds everything in small boxes. So Quiver is my choice for taking notes, for developer notes.
Are you more a Office or cloud, Google Cloud person?
I'm more Office, but the work I do involves Google Docs. You just can't get away from it. It's everywhere. So it's because you have to collaborate with people. That's when Google Docs comes in. But if I had the choice, it would be Office.
See, I'm in the same boat. Everybody's been switching to Google Docs. I don't know if it's a personal distrust of Google having all of my documentation there. It's that concept of having my files local, but I do trust Dropbox. So I don't know if that says anything that I trust Dropbox more than I trust Google. Granted, I also trust being able to encrypt my files. Now, interestingly enough, as much as I love Office, and I will admit I worked on the team, I love Excel. I know people hate Excel. I'm one of those people who not only uses Excel, but I use it as a database. I use it as columnar paper. I use it, if I could roll it up, I use it as a newspaper to swat the kids off the front yard. But as much as I love Word and Excel, I've switched to Keynote for Apple, because Apple Keynote is just, I think, one of the best pieces of software ever developed. And my reasoning behind that was the first piece of software that Jobs said, I don't want to use Office for this anymore. Make me a piece of software that I won't get pissed at. And well, it's Jobs who got pissed at everything. So, but I definitely, I love Keynote. BB Edit for the text editing I talked about earlier. Apple Notes. I think that covers it for all of our personal productivity.
I'll say one of the things that I really love about Google Docs, in contrast to a lot of other shared things that I've worked with, is I really like just when you're editing somebody else's work and you can change it to suggesting, and it doesn't mess around with their file, but they can see it and choose to accept it or not. And perhaps there are other easy cloud-based shared collaborative tools, but I find that feature of Google Docs very straightforward and useful in a group setting.
I have to say Google Docs seems to get that sync thing like better than anybody else. Microsoft, Apple, like Google Docs by far, it does the co-editing thing really, really well, better than anybody else.
Yeah, I found like for life stuff like notes or reminders on, we're a mostly Apple family. The stuff that supposedly can be collaborative does not actually seem to work that way. So that's frustrating.
And
I need a lot of organization tools. So Google Calendar, I could not live without it. I think that would be my single most important thing. And then I'm using I need a to-do list desperately. And I have not found one that I like better than Habitica. And it's gamified, and I like that feature, but I don't usually have time for the gamified feature. But the way that it has options, because you can have habits or a list and different, and dailies. I cannot find another to-do list that is better than Habitica as far as my needs, and I can tailor it to all of my needs. So I've tried every to-do list there is. And I've stuck with Habitica for 5 or 6 years now.
And I'm pretty sure, I think Habitica is open source too. So you can.
It is.
Yeah,
I wrote a Google action to add one to a list once, and I had a lot. So you can play with it. You can build onto it if you want to.
Yeah, how fun. Thank you for reminding us.
It'd be great for developers. Developers who want to do a portfolio piece, because they have groups of people who they have a guild for people who want to develop. So you can ask questions of people who are, and they have a whole community around that. So if you're looking for an open source project, that would be fun.
Yeah, there's a whole subreddit for it. So
there's a Reddit for everything.
Yeah, true.
There's subreddits we don't even want to go into.
Definitely not.
So I know there's Kindle for reading. There's also Apple Books. Are there any other choices?
Oh, do we want to talk about this? This is a whole episode. This is a whole genre of podcast, Drew.
What are
So
we reading?
something-
Is it EPUBs or is it like PDFs?
Is it a PDF or an EPUB?
Yeah, good questions.
That's true. I mean, some of
Because
the, well,
if
Kindle
for
handles
me,
both,
if
doesn't it?
if it's
Well, so does Apple Books, but Apple Books has a weird thing where if you're opening a PDF on a iOS or iPad OS device, it works just fine. But if you open a PDF on your Mac, it opens up in preview, which is so annoying. It doesn't sync or anything.
Yeah. So it
Well,
sounds
and
like,
If you're
I
talking about
like,
but
I was gonna say for opening, for if it's a PDF for like a work or learning thing, I like to open it on my iPad in a note-taking app where I can add a layer of notes on it. But then, then depending on what app you chose, maybe that's searchable, maybe that's not. It really depends on what you're reading and what you're doing with it. And, I think I am an avid Kindle user, but I think of that as more pleasure reading. I rarely read work stuff on the Kindle, although sometimes, but I can't write on my Kindle, and I like being able to do that.
I think one of the things that separates the Kindle from the Apple app for me is the way it organizes. And the search capabilities on Apple tend to make me a little happier. But I agree with Fuad that I am very much annoyed at the fact that on the Mac, I am bumped to what I consider to be an inferior PDF reader.
okay, in my case, I simply treat for EPUBs, I import them into Apple Books, but for
Same.
PDFs, I import them into Notability, because Notability can sync with your iPad and you can get to write on it. But I have the Notability before subscription because we were grandfathered in. So the new ones, everyone pays a subscription, but as we were grandfathered in, because it was caused a big controversy when they switched to subscription. So as we were grandfathered in, so I still have my rights to import as many PDFs as I want. And it can sync using Dropbox, using Google Drive, using a whole bunch of things it can sync with.
Yeah, I'm in the exact same boat as Franklin. I just follow the same thing. If I want to mark it up, I'm using Notability. I'm also grandfathered in, so I have all the features, and I use Apple Books when I want to read an EPUB.
That's very cool. As an educator, I realize that a lot of publishing companies that I've used have their own reader, and you're kind of confined to that depending on the publishing company. So I have sometimes some e-textbooks that we just have to use their reader.
I think that was one of the things that hobbled O'Reilly, because O'Reilly used to be the zoo of books. Because, well,
so many delicious titles, so much good stuff.
So many fantastic titles. I'm turning to look at my bookshelf, and I can see at least 4 O'Reilly on the first shelf I look at right in a row. And I remember them going through their own proprietary reader. And I think that may have been, I think proprietary readers were one of those things that hobbled some of these publishing companies.
I find that in general, people don't like them, especially, or they can be limited. So they're only available on Android, or they're only available on iOS, or they're only available on the web. So I found them to not be particularly popular, and I try to steer away from resources that are married to that.
That's one thing I love about Kodeco, actually, is like you can get all the formats, PDF, EPUB, you can view the book on the web. And the nice thing about the web is and in the EPUB, so you can get the updated, but like if you look on the web, you're getting the latest version, and you can switch even between versions if you want. And you can even highlight, although I think I prefer highlighting with Apple Pencil or whatever, but you can even highlight on the website and take notes on the website.
I love how we can bookmark and stuff too. So I agree. I enjoy using our Kodeco resources a lot more than some other publishing companies for sure. And then I don't have a lot of complaints because students can use it no matter what kind of equipment they own. Because I really hate
Right.
for people to have to buy equipment to read a book because they're already buying the book, you know.
So, who has a piece of technology listening in on them right now? And if they do, what's its name? Suze? I think Suze might have frozen. Jen?
Firefly's AI has probably hijacked our meeting because I don't know how to turn that off, but I subscribe to Firefly's AI. I love it. It is so helpful because it can record meetings. I can throw in like a recording. If there's a show, like maybe a podcast or something that I like, I can put the podcast into Fireflies and then get a summary for myself. Of course, I would never distribute the content, but it's really helpful. And the meeting will give you a summary with action items of what other people said. But it does
No
follow
other-
me around and attend my meetings.
So no smart speakers?
Oh gosh, I've got a lot of those. Don't say the G word in my house. It's like a choir going off in the background. But I have Google Assistants throughout my house. I use them religiously. They're very helpful, especially with I have ADHD. So they're very, very helpful because I can tell it to remember something for me. I can add it to Google Keep. So I have several keep lists that I know the name. And a lot of times by the time I reach pen and paper, or unlike my phone, I've forgotten what I need to do or write down. And then I set timers and alarms all day long too. So if I have a meeting or like this podcast, I had an alarm set for when I need to log in.
Mhm.
And it's when I leave my
Same.
house, I'm in a pickle because I'm always yelling out to my assistant to take notes and stuff, and it's not there.
Well, I'll get back to calendaring and appointments in a moment, but let's talk about the smart speakers first. How about you, Suze?
We have two quite elderly, like I think Gen 1 or soon thereafter Amazon Echoes, the Alexas, and I like them, you know. I mean,
Mhm.
they aren't that smart. They're not very smart speakers. But you know, you can connect them via Bluetooth and Spotify can play through them, and that's pretty much all they're doing. Ever so often, like, you know, right after the Barbie movie came out, they had some Barbie theme,
Oh,
and you could say something to it and it'd say, "Oh, you have a band," and then play sparkly sounding music. And I like that for a little while. So
Franklin, do you have a smart speaker?
I do have a very old Amazon Echo that's in the sitting room, but that's mostly, I think, for the kids and everybody else. I don't have it in the office here. And even on my laptop itself, I disable Siri from mentioning anything because I kept accidentally clicking it all the time. It began to not bug me. So apart from that, I only have Siri on the phone.
Fuad?
Yeah, so I tried the Apple ones for a while, but in general, the non-Apple ones, like the big concern in our household is like privacy. And I think all of them, except for the Apple ones, like they do the processing on the cloud. So that means it's always recording you and always sending your data to the cloud. So if there's a breach or like or if it's a company you don't trust, or you just never know, right? So for us, it just feels weird to have a microphone listening in on you all the time. And even the Apple ones, even though it's processed on device, like it didn't set well with the family. It's like, okay, we got rid of them pretty quickly. So it's our house is pretty much, there's no cameras and there's no microphones.
Yeah, I don't like the cameras because everything I keep hearing from Ring, I keep hearing is that your video is being shared with this company and that group and etc. I will admit, definitely do the Siri thing here. I started because I was afraid I'd set it off. I actually have the hue lights throughout my entire house, so I can actually tell Siri to change lights in a room on a quick thing. But we got onto the topic briefly, so I want to go back to it, and that's calendaring. Again, we're sort of in cloud versus non-cloud here. Most calendaring actually does have syncing with other things, but I have just never been able to make my way onto Google Calendar. I
Fascinating.
use this, and you know, it's it's the calendar of poly choice, so it surprises me that I don't. But I did find one app that I liked, and it was recommended on a poly board, and that was called Cozy, COZI.
Mm.
And it allows up to like 8 adults and 2 children or cats if you want. And it has calendar, it has shopping lists, it has alerts, but it doesn't tie into anything. And since I'm so Siri heavy, I keep wondering, should I try to find some kind of balance between Apple Calendar and Google Calendar? But I haven't. Fuad?
So I use a combination of Apple Calendar and Google Calendar. My default thing is Apple Calendar, but for integration, I use like my Calendly. Like anyone wants to set a meeting with me, it's always through Google Calendar. And the biggest pain point I have like right now is like in my actual Apple Calendar, every meeting is like sometimes they're double, sometimes they're quadrupled. So it's like because I have a service through my email thing that like my email server that will like create, you know, it'll duplicate the calendar. I try turning it off and just somehow like it's just getting out of control. Like so in Apple Calendar, I have like turned off a bunch of the calendars just so they don't repeat, but then like I have to make sure I'm not missing out on events. It's really weird. So I don't have a good solution, but I love Apple Calendar just because that's what I use. But I wish it worked better.
Yeah, I have the cozy thing that I like is that I can put 3 people on an event, but then if I want to syndicate out those calendars to Apple or Google, if I syndicate both my calendar, my spouse's calendar, my kid's calendar, now I've got the event 3 times. And that has seemed to be a problem of collaborative calendaring in general. Franklin, how about you, calendaring?
Okay, I had the same problem as Forward using both Apple Calendar and Gmail Calendar, and I would also have the problem of multiple, like the call is multiple times in the calendar app. But Fantastico solved all of those problems for me because what it does, it merges all 3 events and then gives them like a rainbow color, meaning they belong to more than one calendar. So you don't have that issue. And with Fantastico, it has a companion contacts app, which it also syncs to. So getting the contacts is easy. And that became my default for calendaring.
So you said Fantastical will actually take multiple events that are from the same thing and combine them?
If it's the same event from different calendars, it combines them, then puts a rainbow color. Like let's say a Google Calendar is red and Apple Calendar is blue. So it will combine them and you will see half blue, half red. It's just a dot, but it indicates these are from 2 different sources because it syncs with all of them. What I really like is that I mostly use it for syncing meetups because I can't attend every meetup. So I just want to know what the topic of the meetup is, like for meetup.com. Then I'll decide if I'm going to attend or not. Because you can also accept from inside the calendar, inside the Fantastical.
I know I'm watching our chat and I know people are already like, I'm going to check that one out right after. I know I'm going to check that one out right after I'm done. Suze, how about you on calendaring?
Well, so I kind of use a double system. So I use Google Calendar, and then I also, because this is fun for me and also helps solidify it in my brain, I use a planner that's like a paper planner, only it's in my digital PDF note-taking app. And I use Noteful. I didn't start with Notability. I started with GoodNotes, which also went subscription. And they said, you know, if you're a subscriber, if you've paid, you can have up until GoodNotes 5, and then GoodNotes 6 and beyond, you have to pay again. And so I switched apps. But so that worked for me. But I was going to say, so we used to use Cozy as a family. I could not stand their grocery app part. It just did not work for me. And I'm very picky about that. And And the perfect one has not yet happened. Hopefully I'll write it someday. But anything that works, if you use a calendaring app or a list making app and you've trained your family to use it, that's the one. If you've managed to train your family, use that one. So if your family all knows to look in Cozy, put things in Cozy, and put new grocery items in Cozy, right on.
It is very difficult to offboard and onboard your family to software.
Yes. You know my family.
You know everybody's family. It's I was having problems explaining how to get the printer to work today. Okay, so I mentioned it briefly with calendaring, and that is that Cozy and oh, I'm sorry, Jen, did you have one?
Oh, I was just going to say I loved the shopping list Bring because back in the day, or not too long ago, maybe 6 months ago and prior, it would interface with Google Assistant. So you could tell it to add things to your shopping list through the assistant. And now it doesn't integrate anymore. So, but I'm really sad because me and my daughter both use that one. And you could speak it into the assistant to add items on the shopping list.
Thank you. We had mentioned getting calendars from one place to the other through syndication. And syndication software is old. I mean, there were RSS and Atom many, 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 many years ago. And somebody thought of the idea of using RSS to distribute music, and all of a sudden the podcast was born. If you want the history of podcasting, that's a story that goes back millennium. I had taken an informal query beforehand, but I'm going to go through it again. Nobody here really uses a syndication client that lets them add their own feeds for different things like news or comics or etc. Is that correct?
I used to use one like religiously, and I spent every morning at breakfast reading RSS feeds, but somehow I don't know what happened, but I just stopped reading RSS feeds.
I still use one. It's called InnoReader. And I feel guilty when I have unread items in there. At least I pass through the articles. So at least I pass through the article to see what the developers say. Because I imported the whole of iOS directory. It contains most of the popular RSS feeds. It has over 1,000 feeds. So if an iOS developer is publishing, he's going to publish iOS div directory. So he just brings in all of that. But I try to make sure at least I'm on zero. Like the way I have zero email, I'm always on zero RSS.
Yeah, I can't do that. I used to, for a while, I was like, I'm going to keep my email zeroed out. I'm going to keep my RSS feed zeroed out. And I realized this is futile and I will drive myself insane trying to keep everything zeroed out. So now I have 35,000 emails in one of my email accounts.
I think the one I used was called Feedly, like Feed LY.
Oh,
Feedly.
yeah.
Feedly, yes.
Yeah,
Is that still around?
Yeah, it's still
Wasn't
around. It
it?
replaced Google. I remember Google's it was Google Feed or something like that. So then Feedly and InnoReader came out of that.
Yeah, I used to use Google Feed. I used to use NetNewsWire. Now I use something that's just simply called Newsreader. I mean, there is Apple News if you're on a Mac, but Apple News doesn't really let you curate your own selections. One of the things that I actually use Newsreader for is I actually monitor the RSS feed for this podcast to make sure that the new episodes have dropped.
Oh, that's a good idea.
I wanted to, or Dru, I have written tutorials. I've used our RSS feed for a tutorial on Google Assistant, and I use our RSS feed to test apps sometimes.
RSS is it's an amazing programming topic. I used to speak on it at companies talking about XML, talking about how XML and RSS worked and some of the more complicated different versions of RSS and the wars that went on between the two factions, as often will occur when people have a standard. But it was good stuff. Okay, let's see.
Also,
We've touched
aren't podcasts RSS also?
podcasts are
Yes.
well, I mean, syndication now is either RSS or Atom. And they both have different XML definitions. But and most newsreaders and podcasts samplers will be able to pick up both styles. I actually wrote one a long time ago, which actually had an Easter egg that you could actually pull in LiveJournal feeds, if you remember LiveJournal from many years ago. And you just it was I wish I had known what I was doing at the time, because I said, if you put in a feed that's LJ:// username, it'll go to LiveJournal. And little did I know I was inventing deep linking.
Oh. Yeah, that's
Things
handy.
that, yeah, it's just like, gosh, I wish I could go back time and say, I'm trademarking this concept.
That's pretty cool.
But anyway, we've talked about things that we use with our hands. Let's move up the hands. Is anybody wearing any wearables? Okay, I see one Apple Watch. Jen, what's yours? Is that two?
Mine is a Samsung. So mine's a Samsung Galaxy Watch.
And Fuad, you had two up. Oh, are they both
Yeah,
Apple? Or
so no, this one is, oh, sorry. This is a Whoop, WHOOP. And so
Oh,
actually, it's, for me, even though it's not a watch, it doesn't have a display. It's pretty dumb as far as interface compared to the watch. But I mean, I've been a long time Apple Watch user since I think second one dropped, and Whoop is way better. I'm sorry. Like I use it
you
to
still think that? Okay, because my
So-
son is actually trying to figure out, he switched to an Apple Watch from a Whoop. So
So I think if Apple wanted to, they could be way better. But the thing is, I think their customer base focus, like their market focus, is a little bit different. So Whoop is
Mhm.
targeted more at like professional and I'm not pro, but like semi-pro or even like just athletes. They're targeting athletes. So I use it to track my recovery, how well I slept, all of this kind of stuff. Like, so I know, is today a good day to work out or not? So it has the same sensors and maybe less than the watch, okay? But their analytics and their presentation is really on par. Whereas Apple, I think, is hitting a different audience and a broader base. So they're not really giving you like the data visualization and the kind of feedback. Like I use C++ on the Apple Watch to do that as far as sleep tracking, but just their data, the data visualization you get back and the analytics you get back is just not on par with Whoop. I mean, obviously, C++ is like one developer and Whoop has like an entire team and they're like a whole company behind them. So, there's a difference there.
Mhm.
But Apple could if they wanted to, but I think that it's not their focus.
Yeah, wearables
So-
for health go back. I worked for a Pittsburgh-based company called Body Media, which eventually got bought out by was it Garmin or TomTom or one of those? But they had the wearable that would track caloric burn and do algorithmics comparisons. For what you've noticed on the Whoop versus the Apple Watch, is it the granularity of the data that you're getting? Because I mean, inevitably, the granularity of the data is where you basically are going to be able to build any app from.
So honestly, I think the data is probably the same on both. The thing is, I never take the Whoop off, almost never, except to shower, right? And the watch, like, first of all, the battery drain, like it wears out
Mhm.
faster, and it doesn't, like, the watch will not be as good a battery over time. But because I think the Whoop does less, and you can the battery, you just strap it on top, like to charge it while you're wearing it. So that's one thing. You don't have to take it off to charge it. So you can never take it off if you want to. And the other thing is, I think it's more of, for me, like data needs to be actionable, right? And so the type of like analytics you're getting back from Whoop is really actionable. Like it's like, hey, like your recovery is poor today. You didn't sleep well today. It's telling you, and it gives you like feedback. They have an AI engine, but I don't even use it. Like it's just their data and their recommendations are really on par. And the really big thing with Whoop is like in general, like with health and fitness, like the way you feel, like your intuition and like how you actually feel, like if you listen to your body is usually on par. And Whoop's data tracks with that. Like, and so over time you can say, yeah, like I know like I'm in the red today and I feel that way. Like you can, there's like a whole like congruity between the data you're getting back and how you feel. And the watch just, they're not giving me that kind of report or that kind of analytics that I get from the Whoop. So I think it's really the team and the focus of like the actionable data.
Now I know
The
the
thing I
Ultra's
wonder with the
giving-
watch,
Let me go.
I was going to say, the thing I wonder with the watch, this all makes sense from what I've heard, although I've never used Whoop myself, but are there third-party apps right now for the watch that will give us, or, you know, that are on the phone, but using the data from the watch that will give us that insight that you're getting from Whoop? Because Whoop's kind of expensive, right? Because you're paying a monthly subscription.
I don't even know because I subscribed for like 3 or 4 years. Like that's nice. They sell you like a package that like I never pay for it because I did it once
Right,
and it's I'm done for like
You're
5
not
years
even
or something.
thinking about it. Yeah.
But there are apps, like I said, C++ is one of them, and there's a bunch. But I just from my use, and I mean, my vertical, like my focus is health and fitness. Like my app development is mainly focused on health and fitness. So like, and I have not seen anyone who's giving that kind of really useful actionable data and in a really useful like their data visualization is good, their team is good, like the you know like there's I forget, oh, Gyroscope, like they if you look at, they have a blog post, like their data looks cool, but like their app, I'm sorry, I don't know if I don't want to badmouth them on the air, but like it's just like you're behind, everything's behind a paywall, so like it's not very useful. But I think just the data you're getting from Whoop is, you know, like the way they present it to you is very useful, and I haven't seen that so far. Maybe someone else, you know, has seen that, but I haven't seen that from any watch apps that are out there.
Have you
That'd be
ever
a good
tried
market though.
the Oura Ring? And what did you think about it if you tried it?
I haven't tried it. I have heard a lot of good, like a lot of people I follow and like I've heard who use the Oura Ring. So it seems like they also have really good data. But I personally don't have experience with it.
Did you get a chance to look at the Ultra in the Apple Watch? And is it just the same problem?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. The watch, the ecosystem is the same, right? Ultra, you have maybe more sensors and you have like a battery that will last you more than a day. So that's, and you know, like Ultra is probably on my want list, but actually, honestly, the more I've been using Move for a few years now, and like the longer I wear it, like I'm like, do I really want to get another watch? Like, I don't know. Because it's like it's so
Mhm.
expensive. The watch itself, the hardware is really expensive, and the Ultra is way more expensive. And then like, but am I really like, what do I use the watch for now? It's just telling the time, like, and some apps. I mean, there are some uses, like I use it as a remote for my camera, and like all that, those kind of like cool integrations, those are very useful. Or even the alarm that wakes me up in the morning, the fact that it taps me on the wrist, that's a huge thing. Like for that alone, I keep using watch, I think. But just I think as far as from the athletic perspective, I just don't really. I normally when I do the workout, I will use both. I'll track it on Strava, on the watch, on my Whoop, everything at the same time, just so I can compare. But then like usually it's like the Whoop is like the better, you know, the better data that I keep.
Now, Suze, I know you went to the Apple Watch after
From
much
nothing.
after
You're
like
saying
season
like as
one's.
though I switched. I switched from wearing nothing to wearing an Apple Watch. You get more data than nothing. So
Yeah, well, I don't mean you switched. I mean you adopted the Apple Watch after like all of season one's pressure.
yes, after I was publicly mocked on air. Yes, I did.
I wasn't mocking you.
What really tipped me over the edge is when my family, we had visiting family and we were all sitting around the table and I was the only one without a watch. And so, you know, it was the 1-2 punch of the public mocking and the private mocking tipped me over the edge. So
Mhm. I will admit, I actually did the version 0 of the watch, and I got burnt because the version 0 was promptly replaced by the version 1. But the haptic was important to me because my spouse is hearing impaired. And the fact that it had so much that it did from a haptic point of view. So you could have alarms that would tap you. You could have directions that would tap you. It just, to me, I had to find out if it was going to live up to that. And I got my spouse the version 1 as soon as it came out. So I liked it. Other wearables. Now, we could do an entire show on other wearables. And we're probably going to do another show on other wearables, but I will say that, yes, I succumbed to the Vision. I think it's absolutely fantastic. I don't think it's for the average person at all. I think it's for developers only and for people who like plunking down far too much on gadgets. But other than that, I really don't think that this is something that really fits in the scope of the show beyond it's a wearable.
Yeah, and it's really pricey right now. I haven't even gone to do I want to try it out at the Apple Store, but I haven't done that yet.
Oh,
So.
definitely. I definitely recommend everybody go to the Apple Store and try the experience out because it's all been very, very curated to become just a really fun, free 30-minute ride. And then tell yourself, no, you really don't need it. Go ahead.
What's really interesting to me, and it's weird because it seems like a lot of these shows came out before Vision was released, but a lot of these shows on like all the different, like whether it's Netflix or Prime, like there's so many shows that are all like doing stuff that are like something that's the Vision Pro like, it's like it's become a meme or like a thing that's like in all of these like science fiction shows, like even before, and it's weird because some of them like did Apple secretly make something that's not for Apple TV? Because some of them like the lenses look just like Vision Pro. Like there's a new one, I forget the name of it.
Yeah,
But
the
it's
one
on
for
Prime.
the one for the Quest that just came out. The lenses for it's not Zeiss, it's one of the other optical companies has contracted in with Meta to do lenses for the Quest. I think I could be wrong on this, but yeah, it's one of those things where I stand on my belief that Apple doesn't engineer hardware; it engineers ubiquity. And
I think that's a great phrase.
Apple engineers the future. Nobody saw the iPhone coming, and 2 years after the iPhone, everybody's making things that basically look like an iPhone. They're different in their own way, but everybody's making them. And the entire ecosystem of the last 20 years can really be pointed to that little creation. So I think that that's what they're doing with this thing as well. They're just not trying to get it into as many hands to begin with. But we're really off topic here, and I'm going to digress back to the fact that, Fuad, we got to talk to you about health. Franklin, I want to talk to you about Pomodoro because you recommended that in a Kodeco newsletter, and I want to know, do you use any software to manage that?
Yes, I think I have over 10 Pomodoro tools because every time I try out one, I discover a problem with it, and then I don't like it and I move to the next one. But the one I've used for the past 2 years is called Flow. So it's called Flow. It does everything that Pomodoro can do, tracking your data, tracking your statistics, and blocking, and also blocking websites, blocking apps. It does all of that. And it's the app I use. Because for me, the problem is always starting a task. But after I do those first 25 minutes, then I have energy to do the rest. But normally, it is always starting a task. And that's why I recommended Pomodoro. It may not work for everyone, but to me, it does work. It's like it tricks your mind into getting ready to start a task. So the app I use is actually called Flow. It has great design and has all the features that I would want from blocking to tracking to a lot of features.
Well, speaking of productivity apps reminded me because I thought of timing and stuff like that, like keeping track of time tracking. So a time tracking app, and it's not so much that the phone app is really great or anything, but I love the time apping tool called Rescue Time, because I used to spend a lot of time using tools that were timers and things to track my time. And Rescue Time basically just records whatever apps or internet sites and even your software. And it'll do it across all your PCs and devices. And then I can very accurately say, oh, well, how much time was I, messing around on Amazon, or, how much time was I shopping on Amazon, or how much time was I using social media? And I don't always want the answers to those questions, but it's good to know. So
was the
it's
name
a
of that again?
real Rescue Time, and it'll track everything. You can also use it as a blocker. So if I'm having a tough time staying off a website, you can have it block you off your unproductive sites while you're working. So as focus sessions, but I mostly use it to track time, and as hands-free, I don't have to do anything. So I was spending a lot of time tracking. Rescue Time just does it all, and I can just go look in the reports.
Yeah,
That
I use
sounds
timing.
great.
I use timing tracker, which does the same thing. It'll capture URLs as well as what apps are currently in use. But you can actually assign projects to URLs. You can assign projects to apps. So if I'm developing, I can say, well, I'm working on this project. And then I can actually say, well, these URLs are Apple developer URLs. They go into time track for that project. If I'm doing Audition or I'm looking at Trello, that goes into podcast time. So I really love that time tracking app.
Jen, there's an app I'm hoping, it's actually a site, I think, that I was hoping you're going to mention because you shared it before in our Kodeco discussions, that is, you log into it and you're working with somebody else, but not really. It creates like a virtual office sense, if you want that, to motivate you to get your work done. What app is that?
That is a product called FocusMate, and they don't have an app for the phone, but what you can do is pin their website to your desktop. And I have their website pinned on my desktop, and it'll take you right to the page so you can do your scheduling on their webpage. I love that. It's really good for things like taxes or grading. Routine tasks are wonderful because if I can't make myself start on them, I schedule a FocusMate, and you can pick 25, 50, or 75 minutes, and it randomly assigns you a partner. You can keep favorites of partners. You can only match with favorites, or you can match with random people. And especially if you work at home and you're starting to feel really isolated, and I've met some really cool people in there. So I love FocusMate. I live in a nice city, but I've met probably most of the people here. So I love FocusMate. I meet new friends. I have a great time in that.
We didn't talk about this, but this is DevUtils, and it contains small, so many things that you don't need them until you actually need them, and then you have to go online to get them. So it contains a lot of tools. I think I've only used about 5 of them, but it contains so many tools. They contain about 47 tools. From Unix time converters to best for string encoders. You don't need them until the day you actually need them, and then you need to use this tool. And I find that very useful. It comes up in
This
random,
looks so yummy.
random things.
That's a great
Nice.
recommendation.
Suze, how about you?
But the app I would love to plug is an internet streaming radio app that runs on all things Apple. And it is legitimately, and Dru is laughing because it's made by a company I work with, but it is also a really great, simple app. And it's called Ether, which is Polish for ether, like radio waves going over the ether, because the gentleman who developed it is Polish. But it's free to use and it runs on everything. We know it needs some work on Vision Pro, but none of us have bought one yet, so we haven't tested it on the hardware. And then if you want to would love your help. If you want to save favorites, then it's $5 and it's a one-time purchase. So why is that cool? It's cool. I think the coolest thing is you can save off your radio stations. And then when you travel, you get your rental car, you plug your phone into the rental car, and there's your home news station. And you aren't like, where's the radio? What do I even like? It's one less stress when you travel, but it's also like radio. Anytime you want to have radio, it's right there on every single Apple thing. So
does it let you get like airwave radio stations like that are publicly available in different regions, or
it works off of something called radio browser.info. So if it's in their database, or you can add anything via URL. So if something has a URL, then yes, but it's not getting anything from the airwaves. It's playing all through through streams.
Yeah, I know we were already talking about time tracking, so it's kind of in that same bucket, unfortunately, I guess. But I learned about this from my business mentor, and I started using it, and it blew my mind, honestly, because one thing it does really, really well, I mean, it's not even the feature that I love about it the most, but it does really well, is, syncing is always a hard problem, but it's like use it for time tracking. But I can start a timer on any device, and I can check on any other device, and it's like it starts. And if I stop it somewhere else, it stopped. Like it works the way it's. I mean, sometimes like, so one cool thing about on the Mac is if I'm not using my Mac, I walk away and come back, and I did some other task. It says you are idle for this many minutes, and you can like opt to save that as a different task or just throw it away. So that's cool. I wish it had that feature on all other platforms. It doesn't. But other than that, like it just works really well. But the thing I really love about it is every Monday, I analyze my time for the past week. It's part of like my business mentorship, like I guess accountability, and the visualizations and the charts. I mean, they're simple, but they work really well. So I can look, and you can categorize your tasks, and you can add tags. There's many ways to do it. So I can edit in a glance, see really quickly. It gives you like pie charts, bar charts, but like, I can sort by how much time I spend on stuff. I can see where did my productivity go, where did it not go. I even track things that like maybe most people don't, like how much time I spend on breakfast. But like it gives me an idea, like, oh, I'm spending too much time, like, at breakfast time, like, doing or on dishes, like where can I trim things down and make my life more optimal? So I think for me, it's a really, really good productivity app.
And that app was
Toggle, Toggl.
okay. I love,
and it works on the web too. Yeah.
Yeah, I used to use it too. And one of the things, so I think I'm not as optimized. One of the things that it does that was so handy for me is if you leave a timer running, it will let you know and ask you, did you mean to leave this timer running? And then, like Fuad said, it's very easy to just get rid of that. And it's also, it tracks your time, but then you can manually edit if it's not, like if you've forgotten to, if you're using another time tracking method, you want to add it to your toggle tracking. So yeah, it's a very nice free product.
It syncs with your calendar. So you can opt to automatically have like this podcast is scheduled for a certain time. You can just automatically let it count that time without having to track it manually.
Yeah, it's really nice and clean and pretty.
Mm-hmm. I do want to mention Set App,
yes.
which is sort of a mini app store for the Mac with a lot of great utilities, and it's very compact. It's very simple. It's a light subscription price, but it has a lot of good tools that I enjoy.
So I use it too, and also because this is part of how I relate to the world. They're lovely people. The people at MacPaw who make Set App, they're your money's going towards a great little company that makes great software. They also make Clean My Mac, so it's a fun subscription to have too. It's like Netflix for Mac apps and iOS apps.
Franklin, what do you do when you've taken your hands off the keyboard and you're just having time to yourself? What kind of hobbies do you have? What do you do for fun?
For fun, mostly going out or Netflix. Those are the two options I mostly do. But it's either fun going out or Netflix. So yeah, a good cold beer and a whiskey, and you're set for the weekend.
Fuad?
So I kind of cheat. Like Franklin says he likes Netflix. So to optimize my time again, like what I'll do is I limit myself to watching movies if only if I'm on the bike, which sounds scary, but it's like an indoor trainer when I'm riding indoors, and if it's not a really hard ride, because then I'll just be watching like, cycling stuff. But that that's where I get my movie watching in, and but it has to be an action movie, or otherwise it's really hard to pedal if it's not motivated that way. So I do like riding and martial arts and stuff like that. So fitness
I didn't
stuff.
I didn't even think about taking the vision to the gym.
I don't think it's meant for working out, but there's if you're interested, Drew, there's a really cool video I can link to you later from this guy who does a lot of reviews on like fitness equipment. He did one with the Vision Pro on a bike, and he's like sweating like crazy. He's like, even though they didn't make it for that, it's just like the original watch wasn't made to be waterproof, but actually it was. The Vision Pro is really actually works really well under on a fixed bike where you're not moving outside. He rode it outside, and it's kind of scary, and there's like some lag which could cause you to die. So I wouldn't recommend that.
Yeah,
But yeah, Vision Pro works really well.
Yeah, I think that
Uh,
has whatever comes later in the iterations. I think there's some amazing fitness possibilities in there. I think it's too heavy in with the external battery for that just yet, but that's exciting. We're working what it'll help us with in fitness.
So the last question that we've been asking is, this is a time of really harsh strife around the entire world. What do you do to keep calm? How do you do to find your zen? And if it's software, it helps with the topic of the day. Fuad?
So I mean, one thing is like prayer. And then so I use that instead of meditation because for me that just works. And then I did like EMDR, so it's a kind of therapy. But in that line, in that vein, like you learn a lot of things like breathing techniques. So like there's like different types of breathing, like box breathing, and I found so my resting heart rates were really low already, but I can control it with my thoughts. And then the box breathing really lets you control it and get it down. Like so if I get upset about something, like just that breathing technique, just remembering to do that, I think really helps refocus.
Wonderful. Franklin, what do you do to just find your calm or your zen?
Find my calm on my center. I would say something similar to Fuad. It's not really. It is to do with church. So it's not prayer in church, but it's what called fellowship. I don't know if that's a popular term, but we call it fellowship here. You go and meet with a whole bunch of folks, and you just talk about the Bible and talk about religion, and so that's a center for me.
Wonderful. People are definitely finding strength in their in their personal faith, and I think that is a marvelous thing in this day and age. Well, we have covered a whole lot of apps today, and a whole lot of applications, and a whole lot of functions, and a whole lot of wearables, and I cannot thank my entire team more than enough today, especially Susan and Jen for both being here today to chime in on all the things. Fuad, Franklin, I really have to thank you for joining us for this episode. It gave us a lot of insight. Franklin, again, many thanks to you striking up at some of the latest. What time is it right now?
4 a.m. It's now 4 a.m.
I thought it was
Now
coming up
4
on
a.m.
4. It's crazy.
Yeah, I think Jen's face tells it everything. Folks, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you. It was like my pleasure to be here, as always.
It was also my pleasure. I learned a few apps that I'm also going to try out right now.
Oh yeah,
same
I'm
here.
planning on it as well. We will be having another episode in just a few weeks. We are going to be talking about the difference between freelance and corporate, and how to strike out not strike out, but how to strike forth in each of those fields, and where the pros and where the cons are. We hope you'll tune in for that. We hope you'll continue to tune in, and as always, leave a message on your favorite podcasting app with positive responses. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.